The hammer struck wood with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, each blow sending dust motes dancing through the October air. Maeve O'Rourke paused to wipe sweat from her brow, squinting against the afternoon sun that painted Wyoming's endless sky the color of faded denim. Her small plot of land stretched before her, marked by fresh-driven stakes and dreams stubborn as prairie grass. "Another nail, another day closer," she muttered, hefting another plank onto the sawhorses. The cabin frame stood like skeleton bones against the horizon, waiting for walls and a roof before winter's teeth could bite. The sound of hooves made her straighten, one hand instinctively moving to the Winchester propped against the water barrel. A line of cattle moved across the distant ridge, their dust cloud hanging like smoke in the still air. Behind them rode a man who sat his horse like he'd been born to it, his weathered hat pulled low against the sun. Jesse Coulter had been trailing cattle through this valley for near a decade, long enough to know every waterhole and game trail, long enough to notice when something new appeared on the landscape, like the woman currently glaring at him from beside a half-built cabin, her red hair catching fire in the afternoon light. He guided his mare down the slope, keeping his movements slow and easy. No sense spooking a woman alone with a rifle close to hand. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim. "Fine day for building." Fine day for minding one's own business, too. Her accent held a touch of Ireland beneath the prairie dust. Green eyes studied him with the wariness of a cat watching a dog. Jesse's lips quirked. "Reckon so. Though I couldn't help but notice you're trying to raise that ridge beam alone. That's a two-person job. Unless you're planning to grow a third arm." "I'll manage." She turned back to her work, dismissing him. He should have ridden on, had cattle to move, miles to cover before dark. Instead, he found himself dismounting, ground-tying his mare with the ease of long practice. "Jesse Coulter," he said, pulling off his gloves. "I run cattle for the Triangle B outfit. That beam's going to buckle if you try to lift it solo. Let me lend a hand. Then I'll be on my way." Maeve's jaw tightened. In Boston, accepting help had always come with a price. Out here, she'd hoped things might be different, but she'd learned hard lessons about hope. "I don't take charity, Mr. Coulter." "Not offering any. How about a trade? I help with your beam. You help me with this." He gestured to his shirt, where a tear ran from shoulder to elbow. "Been meaning to mend it for weeks, but my needlework would make a blind badger laugh." She studied him for a long moment. He had an honest face, weathered by wind and sun, with eyes the gray of storm clouds. His offer felt clean, without hidden hooks. "Fair trade," she said finally. "But the beam first." They worked in companionable silence, Jesse's strength making quick work of what would have taken her hours of struggle. He knew his business. She'd give him that. His hands were sure on the wood, placing each support with practiced ease. "You chose a good spot," he said as they secured the last brace. "Protected from the north wind, near water. Someone taught you well." "I taught myself." The words came out sharper than intended. "Books, mostly. And watching others back in Boston. Boston's a far piece from Wyoming territory." "Far enough." Her tone closed that door firmly. Jesse didn't push. In his experience, everyone out here was running from something or towards something. Sometimes both. "Well, you've got a good start. Though you'll want to think about chinking those walls tight before the snow flies. Winter here doesn't knock before entering." Maeve fetched her sewing basket from the tent that served as her temporary home. Jesse's shirt was well made, but hard used, the kind of garment that had seen years of honest work. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a crate. "This'll take some doing." Her fingers were quick and neat, the needle flashing in the late afternoon sun. Jesse watched her work, noting the calluses already forming on her palms, the determined set of her shoulders. "You planning to run cattle on this spread?" "Horses, maybe, and a garden, enough to live on." She kept her eyes on her stitching. "The land agent said I had water rights to that spring." Jesse's expression darkened slightly. Land agent named Sullivan Man with a gold tooth and a smile like a snake. That's him. Jesse's non-committal grunt held volumes. You get those water rights on paper properly witnessed. Of course, but uncertainty crept into her voice. He said the territorial seal made it official. Before Jesse could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both look up. 3 riders were coming fast from the direction of town, dust boiling up behind them. Maeve set aside the shirt and stood, that wariness back in her stance. Jesse rose too, casual-like, but his hand stayed near his hip. The lead rider was Deputy Wade Krantz, his badge catching the light and his mean little eyes taking in the scene. Flanking him were 2 men Maeve didn't recognize, both wearing the hard look of hired muscle. Well, well, Wade drawled, not bothering to dismount. The Irish widow's got herself a caller. Ain't that cozy? I'm not a widow, Maeve said quietly. And Mr. Coulter was just leaving. That's so. Wade's gaze slithered between them. Funny thing about your water rights, Miss O'Rourke, seems there's a problem with your documentation. Maeve's spine stiffened. What kind of problem? Missing a county seal, for one, makes the whole thing invalid. Legally speaking, you'll need to stop any well digging till it's sorted. But Sullivan says a lot of things. Wade's smile was all teeth. You can come to town tomorrow. Pay the proper fees. Might be a fine involved too, for starting construction without proper permits. Jesse spoke up, his voice mild as milk. Funny how these problems only come up when Silas Creed takes an interest in a piece of land. Wade's face darkened. You'd best stick to pushing cattle. Coulter, this ain't your concern. Just making an observation. The 2 men locked eyes for a long moment before Wade spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Jesse's boots. Tomorrow, Miss O'Rourke. Don't make me come looking for you. He wheeled his horse around, his men following. Maeve waited until the dust settled before speaking. Who's Silas Creed? Railroad money. Owns half the territory. Wants the other half. Jesse picked up his shirt, examining her neat stitches. Your land sits right where the railroad's planning a water stop. That spring of yours could water 1,000 head of cattle or fill a dozen steam engines. But I filed everything properly. I paid. I'm sure you did. His voice held a gentleness that made her throat tight. But men like Creed, they've got ways of unfiling things, making problems where none existed. Maeve sank onto the crate, suddenly tired. She'd used most of her savings to buy this land, to start fresh where nobody knew her name or her shame. Now it seemed the past had different faces, but the same grasping hands. Thank you for your help today, she said formally. Your shirt's on the barrel. Jesse studied her for a moment, then nodded. You'll want witnesses tomorrow. Friendly ones. Doc Rivera's usually at the courthouse on Tuesdays. He's Mexican, but he's been here longer than most, and he's got no love for Creed. He swung into his saddle with the easy grace of a lifetime horseman. And Miss O'Rourke might want to move that water barrel. Wade's got a habit of his horses accidentally knocking things over. He touched his hat and was gone, leaving Maeve alone with the dying light and the weight of tomorrow. She moved the water barrel, as suggested, then sat on her doorstep watching the stars emerge. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, the sound lonely as her own heart. But she'd be damned if she'd run again. The next morning, she found the water trough split clean through, the precious liquid soaking into the thirsty ground. Boot prints led to and from the damage, deliberate as a signature. Maeve stared at the ruined trough for a long moment. Then she picked up her hammer and got to work. She had a cabin to build and a life to defend. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to do it alone. The morning sun found Maeve on her knees beside the ruined water trough, her hands raw from hauling buckets from the spring. 3 horses stood patient in the meager shade, their eyes dull with thirst. She'd managed to water them, but it had taken half the morning and most of her strength. The sound of wheels made her look up. A buckboard was approaching, driven by an older man with silver threading through his black hair. Beside him sat a plump woman in a flour-dusted apron. "You must be Miss O'Rourke," the man said, climbing down with the careful movements of someone whose bones knew too many winters. "I'm Doc Rivera. This is Mrs. Kowalski from the neighboring spread. Mr. Coulter said you might need some water." "Mrs." Kowalski added, her Polish accent thick as cream. "We brought barrels." Maeve's throat tightened. "I can't pay." "Nobody asked you to," Doc Rivera said firmly. "Out here. Water trouble is everybody's trouble. Today you, tomorrow me. Yes." They helped her fill her containers. Mrs. Kowalski chattering about her chickens and the best way to preserve vegetables for winter. It was the kind of ordinary talk Maeve had missed more than she'd realized. "You come to town meeting tonight," Mrs. Kowalski said as they prepared to leave. "At the church. Important to show face. Let people know you're staying." "I don't think I'd be welcome." Doc Rivera's eyes were knowing. "More welcome than you think. Creed doesn't own everyone, no matter what he believes." After they left, Maeve found something else, a shirt draped over her doorstep, neatly mended where she'd sewn it yesterday. Pinned to it was a note, "For your trouble, J.C." Tucked inside was a small packet of coffee, worth its weight in gold this far from the railroad. She held the shirt for a moment, then set it aside. She had work to do. The Sagebrush Bluff town meeting was held in the Methodist Church, a whitewashed building that served as courthouse, dance hall, and gathering place depending on the day. Maeve slipped in late, choosing a back pew where she could watch without being seen. The church was fuller than she'd expected. Ranchers in their best shirts, townswomen in careful bonnets, merchants and laborers all pressed together in the golden lamplight. At the front, Mayor Hutchins, a nervous man who owned the general store, was speaking about the proposed railroad spur. "Mr. Creed assures me the railroad will bring prosperity to our town." He was saying, jobs, commerce, a direct link to civilization. At what cost? The voice came from the middle pews. Jesse Coulter stood, his hat in his hands. "We've all seen what happens when the railroad comes through. Small spreads get bought out or forced out. Water rights get consolidated. Pretty soon, a man can't run his own cattle without paying Creed for the privilege." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. "Now, Jesse," Mayor Hutchins dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. "Progress requires sacrifice." "Whose sacrifice?" This from a grizzled rancher Maeve didn't recognize. "Sure isn't Creed making any sacrifices. He's already grabbed the Turner spread and the widow Morrison's place. Who's next?" "The railroad brings law and order." A woman near the front spoke up. Maeve recognized her as Mrs. Tillerson, the banker's wife, dressed in black bombazine despite the heat. "Decent folks have nothing to fear from progress." Her gaze found Maeve in the back, sharp as a blade. "Of course, some elements are better suited to other locations. We must maintain proper standards." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maeve felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. "Speaking of proper standards," a new voice drawled from the doorway. Silas Creed entered like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. He was younger than Maeve had expected, perhaps 40, with the kind of pale handsomeness that came from offices rather than outdoors. His suit cost more than most here made in a year. I couldn't help but overhear concerns about my business practices. His smile was practiced, political. "Let me ease your minds. The Territorial Railroad Company has no interest in displacing established ranchers. We simply seek to bring civilization to this rustic paradise." He paused by Maeve's pew, his cologne heavy in the close air. "Of course, we must ensure all land claims are properly documented. Can't have conflicts over ownership when the railroad comes through. Deputy Krantz has been most helpful in identifying irregularities. Irregularities you created, Jesse said quietly. The church went silent. Creed's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Coulter. I trust you have proof. Working on it. The two men stared at each other across the rows of parishioners. The tension stretched until misses. Tillerson's fan snapped open with a crack. Really, such dramatics. Mr. Creed is offering opportunity. If some people's claims don't hold up to scrutiny, perhaps they shouldn't have been made in the first place. Like the Morrison widow's claim, Doc Rivera stood slowly. 40 years on that land, and suddenly her papers are irregular. She was happy to accept Mr. Creed's generous offer. Mrs. Tillerson sniffed. After her well went dry and her fence posts kept ending up broken. Someone muttered. Mayor Hutchins banged his gavel, a hammer he'd borrowed from the general store. Please, please. We're here to discuss the railroad proposal, not air grievances. The meeting dissolved into arguments. Neighbors taking sides. Voices rising. Maeve slipped out into the cool evening air, needing space to breathe. She'd barely reached the church steps when a hand caught her elbow. She spun, expecting Creed or Wade, but found a woman near her own age with corn silk hair and a dress cut fashionably low. You're the Irish girl, the woman said. It wasn't a question. The one living alone out by Sweetwater Spring. Maeve O'Rourke, and you are Bethany Clare. The name came with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I knew your husband. In Kansas City. Maeve's blood chilled. I don't have a husband. No Thomas Worthing spoke so fondly of his wife. Red hair, he said, Irish accent. Quite the devoted spouse. Until you ran off with his money. That's a lie. The words came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. Thomas Worthing was a gambler and a cheat who married me for my father's money, then lost it all at cards. When the creditors came calling, he told them I'd stolen from him rather than admit he'd gambled it away. Bethany's laugh was like breaking glass. Such a dramatic story. I'm sure the good people of Sagebrush Bluff will be fascinated to hear it. Both versions. She swept away, leaving Maeve shaking with anger and old hurt. She'd run so far, changed her name, started over, but the past had teeth, and they were sharp as ever. Don't mind her. Jesse's voice came from the shadows. He stepped into the lamplight, his expression unreadable. Bethany Clare spreads gossip like other folks spread manure. Difference is, manure's useful. You heard? Enough. He studied her for a moment. Worthing, I knew a card sharp by that name in Abilene. Smooth talker, bad at losing. That was him. Maeve wrapped her arms around herself. I was young and stupid. Thought marriage would be an escape from my father's expectations. Instead, you ended up here. Jesse's voice held no judgment. Could do worse. Wyoming doesn't care much about what you were, only what you do. Men like Creed care. Creed cares about water and land. The rest is just tools to get them. He paused. You should know Wade's been talking to the land office in Cheyenne. Might be wise to get your papers witnessed proper before he finds more irregularities. How do you know all this? Jesse's smile was crooked. Bartenders hear things. Hector Boone owes me a favor or two. He tipped his hat and started to leave, then turned back. That coffee I left, brew it strong. Tomorrow's likely to be a long day. Maeve watched him disappear into the darkness, then looked up at the stars. In Boston, she'd never seen them properly, lost in the gas lamp glow. Here they burned fierce and clean, countless as the challenges ahead. Inside the church, voices still rose and fell like tide. She could go back in, face the stares and whispers. Or she could go home, brew that coffee, and plan her next move. She chose home. The ride back was peaceful, just her and the horses in the vast Wyoming night. But as she crested the final rise, she saw lights where no lights should be. Torches moved around her half-built cabin like fireflies. Her heart hammered as she urged her horse faster. But by the time she arrived, the damage was done. Her tent lay in shreds. Her supplies were scattered. Flour and cornmeal ground into the dirt. The frame of her cabin still stood, but barely someone had tried to pull it down and given up halfway, and painted on the largest standing wall, in letters that gleamed wet in the torchlight, "Go back east." Maeve dismounted slowly, her hands steady despite the fury burning in her chest. She walked through the wreckage, cataloging the damage. They'd been thorough but not complete. Her tools remained, her rifle untouched where she'd hidden it. They wanted her scared. Not dead, not yet. She found her coffee pot dented but whole, the packet Jessie had left still tucked inside. She built a fire in the ruins of her camp, set water to boil, and made the strongest brew she'd ever tasted. Then she sat on a crate amid the destruction and planned. They thought she'd run. They thought a woman alone would fold at the first sign of trouble. They were wrong. As dawn painted the mountains pink and gold, Maeve O'Rourke began to rebuild, board by board, nail by nail. And this time she'd be ready for them. The trail to Livingston stretched ahead like a dusty ribbon, winding through sagebrush and rock formations that looked like God's own sculptures. Maeve adjusted her hat against the morning sun, trying to ignore the man riding beside her. "You don't have to do this," she said for the third time since they'd left her land. Jesse Coulter kept his eyes on the horizon. "Already told you, I've got business in Livingston anyway. Just happens to be the same direction you're headed." It was a lie, and they both knew it. He'd shown up at dawn with an extra canteen and a pack mule loaded with supplies. Just as she was saddling up for the journey, the old surveyor, Samuel Morrison, the same Morrison whose widow had been forced off her land, was reportedly working out of Livingston now. If she could find him, get him to verify her boundary markers, it might be enough to stop Creed's games. "Suit yourself?" she muttered, but she was grateful for the company. The trail had its share of dangers. From both four-legged and two-legged predators, they rode in companionable silence through the morning, stopping at noon to rest the horses in the shade of a cottonwood grove. Jesse produced biscuits and dried beef from his saddlebags, along with 2 apples that had seen better days. "My cooking skills," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Another reason I need to find a wife." The words slipped out casual as breathing, but Maeve saw him stiffen slightly, like he'd surprised himself. She focused on her apple, letting the moment pass. "Tell me about your wife," she said after a while. "If you don't mind." Jesse was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was seeing another time. "Sarah. Met her in Denver when I was just starting out. Pretty as a spring morning, with a laugh that could light up a room." He smiled at the memory. "She was working in her father's store, and I'd find excuses to buy things I didn't need just to talk to her." "How long were you married?" 3 years. 3 good years, until the fever came through." His jaw tightened. "Doc said it was something in the water. Took half the town that summer. I was out on a drive, moving cattle to Kansas. By the time I got back..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Maeve said softly. "Long time ago now. Almost 10 years. He looked at her sideways. "What about you, this Worthing fellow? How'd you get tangled up with him?" Maeve laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My father was a merchant in Boston, successful enough to have ambitions for his only daughter. Thomas Worthing seemed perfect good family, charming manners, promising future in business." She picked at the hem of her riding skirt. "I found out after the wedding that his business was gambling, and he wasn't particularly good at it. When creditors started calling, he told them I'd been stealing from him, hiding money away, even produced forged documents to prove it. And people believed him. A man's word against his wife's, Of course they believed him. The bitterness crept in despite her efforts. My own father believed him. Said I'd shamed the family name. Jesse's expression darkened. So you left. So I ran. She met his eyes. Took what little money I'd hidden legitimately mine from my mother's estate and headed west. Changed my name back to O'Rourke, my mother's maiden name. Figured I'd get far enough away that the past couldn't follow. Past has long legs sometimes. Apparently so. They remounted and continued on, the afternoon heat shimmering off the rocks. As they navigated a narrow passage between two buttes, Jesse suddenly held up a hand. Listen. Maeve heard it too, the jingle of harness. Voices carrying on the still air. Jesse gestured to a cluster of boulders off the trail. They guided their horses behind cover just as a group of riders appeared. 4 men, armed and weather-beaten, with the look of those who lived outside the law. Maeve recognized the type from her journey west, drifters and worse, preying on travelers foolish enough to travel alone. Should be around here somewhere, one was saying. Hank said she left this morning, heading north. Pretty redhead traveling alone shouldn't be hard to spot. Another man laughed, ugly and low. Creed's paying good money to make sure she doesn't make it to Livingston. Jesse's hand moved to his rifle, but Maeve touched his arm, shaking her head. 4 against 2 was bad odds, especially when surprise wasn't on their side. The outlaws passed, their voices fading into the distance. Jesse and Maeve waited a full 10 minutes before emerging. We need to find another route, Jesse said quietly. You mean I need to find another route? Maeve's chin came up. This isn't your fight. Lady, it became my fight the minute I sided with you against Creed. His gray eyes were steady. Besides, I know these trails better than most. There's an old Indian path that'll add a few hours but keep us clear of the main route. They turned east, following a barely visible track through the scrub. The sun was starting its descent when the sky darkened suddenly, unnaturally. Maeve looked up to see clouds building with frightening speed. Storm coming, Jesse said unnecessarily. We need shelter. The first hailstones hit as they were spurring their horses toward a rock overhang. Ice pellets the size of marbles pelted down, sending the horses into a panic. Thunder cracked overhead like God's own rifle. They made it to shelter just as the hail turned vicious. Stones big enough to kill battering the ground, the horses pressed against the rock wall, eyes rolling white with fear. That's when Maeve heard a high, terrified whinny from somewhere out in the storm. There's something out there, she said, peering through the white curtain of ice. Jesse grabbed her arm as she started forward. You can't go out in that. You'll be killed. Another cry, weaker this time. Maeve's heart clenched. It's a horse, maybe a foal. Maeve, no. But she was already moving, using her coat as a shield against the battering ice. Jesse cursed and followed, the two of them stumbling through the chaos. They found the Mustang colt trapped in a narrow ravine, its leg wedged between 2 rocks. It was young, maybe 6 months, its wild eyes bright with pain and terror. The hail had opened cuts along its back, blood mixing with rain. Easy, easy, Maeve crooned, approaching slowly despite the ice hammering her shoulders. The colt tried to rear, making its situation worse. Hold this. Jesse thrust his coat at her, then dropped into the ravine, working together. They managed to free the colt's leg, Jesse lifting while Maeve guided. The young horse stumbled free just as the hail began to ease. They led it back to shelter, the storm passing as quickly as it had come. The colt stood shivering between their horses, its injured leg held at an awkward angle. It's not broken, Jesse said after careful examination. Badly sprained, maybe torn muscle. He won't survive out here alone. Maeve was already tearing strips from her spare shirt to bind the leg. Then he comes with us. A wild Mustang. A baby who needs help. She looked up at him. Isn't that what we do out here, help each other? Jesse's smile was slow but genuine. Suppose it is. They made camp as darkness fell. The injured colt surprisingly calm now that the immediate danger had passed. Maeve shared her medical supplies, such as they were, while Jesse coaxed a small fire to life with damp wood. "You know," he said as they watched the flames dance. "Most folks would have let that colt be, natural selection and all. I'm not most folks." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." Something in his voice made her look at him. In the firelight, his face was all plains and shadows. Handsome in the way of men who'd been carved by hard living rather than blessed by nature. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" "Nothing. Just thinking how Sarah would have liked you. She had a soft spot for strays, too. Used to drive me crazy. All the critters she'd bring home. And yet you helped save this one." "Well," his smile was crooked. "Maybe some habits are catching." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire popping between them. Somewhere, in the darkness, coyotes called to each other, their voices lonely as wind. "Jesse," Maeve said suddenly. "What you said earlier, about finding a wife. Did you mean—" "Forget I said it." His voice was carefully neutral, just thinking out loud. But the words hung between them anyway, delicate as spun glass. Maeve pulled her blanket tighter, though the night wasn't particularly cold. "We should reach Livingston by noon tomorrow," Jesse said, changing the subject. "Morrison's been working out of the land office there. Drinks at the Silver Dollar most evenings." "You know him?" "Know of him. Good man. Honest as they come. If anyone can help you prove your claim, it's him." "And if he's been bought like everyone else?" Jesse poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Then we find another way. There's always another way." The certainty in his voice warmed her more than the flames. She'd been alone so long, fighting every battle by herself, that having an ally felt strange, dangerous even because she was starting to depend on him. And depending on people was how you got hurt. "You should sleep," Jesse said. "I'll take first watch." "Wake me in a few hours." "Sure," he lied, and they both knew it. Maeve curled into her bedroll, the injured colt standing nearby like a small ghost. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the impossibility of what she was trying to do, she felt safer than she had in months. Maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Morning found them back on the trail, the Mustang colt limping along gamely beside Maeve's horse. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving everything sharp-edged and crystalline. "Look," Jesse pointed ahead. "Livingston." The town sprawled in the valley below, bigger than Sagebrush Bluff, with actual streets and more than one church steeple. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and Maeve could hear the distant whistle of a train. "Last chance to turn back," Jesse said. Maeve touched the colt's neck, feeling the wild heart beating beneath her palm. "Forward's the only direction I know." Jesse's nod was approving. "Then let's go find Morrison and get your land sorted proper." They descended toward town, unaware that word of their coming had already arrived, carried by 4 frustrated outlaws who'd lost their quarry in yesterday's storm. Silas Creed didn't like losing, and he was very, very good at changing the rules of the game. The ride back to Sagebrush Bluff took 2 days of hard travel, the Mustang colt growing stronger with each mile. They'd found Morrison in Livingston. All right, drunk as a lord and scared as a rabbit, he'd stammered out apologies, claimed Creed's men had threatened his son, promised to write a statement if they could protect him. But promises from frightened men were worth less than dust, and Maeve knew it. Now, cresting the final ridge above her land, she pulled up short. Jesse whistled low beside her. Where her property markers had stood, new posts gleamed white in the afternoon sun. The railroad company's mark was burned deep into the wood, and a fresh surveyor's flags fluttered like surrender banners in the breeze. "They moved fast," Jesse said grimly. Maeve's hands tightened on the reins until her knuckles went white. 2 weeks of work, of fighting, of hope gone. just like that. Easy, Jessie murmured, and she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the nervous horses. Let's see what's what before we go charging in. They approached carefully, but the damage was already done. The new markers pushed her boundary back a full quarter-mile, cutting her off from the spring that made the land viable. Without water, the plot was worthless scrubland. Legal as scripture, I'm sure, Maeve said bitterly. Let me guess they found some error in the original survey? Or made one? Jessie dismounted, examining the posts. Fresh-cut wood. These went up yesterday, maybe day before. He straightened, scanning the horizon. Question is, where's the welcome committee? As if in answer, riders appeared from behind the low hill where Maeve had planned to build her barn. Wade Krantz led them, his deputy's badge catching the light like a threat. Beside him rode 2 railroad company men in city suits, looking uncomfortable on horseback but determined nonetheless. Miss O'Rourke, Wade called out. Friendly as a rattlesnake. Heard you took a little trip. Find what you were looking for. I found plenty, Maeve replied evenly, including some interesting information about forged documents and bribed officials. Wade's smile never wavered. That's a serious accusation. Hope you got proof to back it up. He gestured to the new markers. Speaking of proof, these gentlemen from the railroad have all the proper paperwork showing the original survey was in error. Seems you've been squatting on company land. One of the suited men cleared his throat. The Territorial Railroad Company is prepared to offer compensation for any improvements you've made to the property. $50 should cover your efforts. $50, Maeve laughed, but there was no humor in it. I paid $300 for this land. Then you were swindled. Ma'am, not our responsibility. Jessie spoke up, his voice deceptively mild. Funny how these survey errors always favor the railroad, almost like someone's going back and changing the records. You calling us cheats? Coulter. Wade's hand drifted toward his gun. Just observing a pattern. Jessie kept his hands visible, relaxed. But Maeve saw the tension in his shoulders, the readiness in his stance. Patterns can be dangerous things to notice. The second railroad man said. He was older, with cold eyes behind wire spectacles. Mister, Creed doesn't appreciate folks stirring up trouble with baseless accusations. Nothing baseless about it, Maeve said. I have the original survey maps, witnessed and sealed. Do you? The man's smile was thin. Because our records show no such documents exist, and without them, you have no claim. Maeve's heart sank. She'd left the maps hidden at her camp, wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath the hearthstone of her half-built cabin. But looking at their satisfied faces, she had a sick feeling they already knew that. I'll need a day to gather my papers, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Of course. Wade's grin widened. We're reasonable men. You've got till sundown tomorrow to vacate. After that, well, squatters aren't looked on kindly in these parts. They wheeled their horses and left, dust rising behind them like smoke from a fire that had already consumed everything she'd worked for. Maeve sat frozen in her saddle until Jessie touched her arm. Come on, let's see what they did to your place. The camp was intact. Surprisingly, her tent still stood. Her tools remained where she'd left them, but when she went to the hearthstone and dug up her hidden cache, she found what she'd feared the oilcloth was there. But the maps inside were gone. In their place was a single sheet of paper with 2 words, final warning. She sank to her knees in the dirt, the paper crumpling in her fist. All that work, all that hope, for nothing. Hey! Jessie crouched beside her. This isn't over. Isn't it? She looked up at him, eyes burning with unshed tears. They've got the law, the money, the power. What have I got? You've got friends, you've got the truth, and you've got until tomorrow to find another way. The truth, she laughed bitterly. The truth is that men like Creed always win. and people like me just get ground under their boots." Jesse was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what makes a Mustang different from a regular horse?" Despite herself, Maeve glanced at the colt grazing nearby. "What?" "They never really break. You can gentle them, train them, ride them for years, but inside, they remember what it is to be free. And when pushed too far," he smiled slightly, "they push back." "This isn't some campfire tale. Jesse, this is real." "I know." He stood, offering her his hand. "That's why we're going to fight it. Starting with a visit to Doc Rivera. He's been keeping records of every land transaction in the valley for 20 years. Might be he's got copies of documents folks think are lost." Maeve took his hand. Let him pull her to her feet. "Why are you doing this? You could ride away, avoid Creed's attention. This isn't your battle." Jesse was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Maybe it wasn't, but somewhere between that first day and now, it became mine too. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to examine too closely. They rode to town as the sun began its descent, the Mustang colt following like a hopeful shadow. Doc Rivera's office was attached to his home, a neat adobe building that smelled of herbs and carbolic. The doctor himself answered their knock, his weathered face creasing with concern when he saw them. "Inside, quickly. You're being watched." They found themselves in a study lined floor to ceiling with ledgers and files, the accumulated history of Sagebrush Bluff in paper and ink. "I heard about the new survey markers," Doc said, pouring them coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since creation. "Creed's getting bolder." "He's got my maps," Maeve said. "Without them." "Without them. You need witnesses." Doc went to a particular shelf, running his finger along the spines until he found what he wanted. "The thing about Creed is he's smart, but he's also arrogant, covers his tracks but doesn't think anyone's keeping score." He opened the ledger, revealing page after page of neat handwriting. "Every land deal, every survey, every witness." "I started keeping doubles after the Morrison widow got run off. Figured someone should remember the truth." Maeve leaned forward, hope kindling in her chest. "Do you have—" "Your original survey, no?" Her heart sank. But Doc continued. "But I have something better. The witness list from when you filed, including one Mr. Josiah Freeman, the territorial assessor who verified your boundaries. He's still alive. Lives over in Cedar Ridge. Creed couldn't buy him man's honest as daylight and stubborn as stone." "Cedar Ridge is a day's ride. Jesse said we'd never make it back by tomorrow sundown." "Then we'll have to buy time." Doc closed the ledger, his expression thoughtful. "The church socials tomorrow afternoon. Most of the town will be there, including Creed and his men. They won't risk violence with witnesses around." "They don't need violence," Maeve said. "They've got the law on their side." "They've got Wade Krantz," Doc corrected. "Not the same thing. The circuit judge comes through next week. If we can delay until then, present Freeman's testimony." He spread his hands. Real law might prevail. It was thin hope, but it was something. They spent the next hour planning, Doc providing names of others who'd been pressured by Creed, people who might stand up if they weren't standing alone. As they prepared to leave, Doc caught Maeve's arm. "Be careful, child. Creed's not above using other tactics. He knows about your past, about Worthing. He'll use it if he has to." "Let him," Maeve said, chin high. "I'm done running from shadows." Outside, night had fallen proper. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. Jesse walked her to her horse, then stood there awkwardly, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Thank you," Maeve said softly, "for everything. Haven't done much yet. You stayed. That's more than anyone's done in a long time." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them electric as summer lightning. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. For a moment, She wanted him to. Then the moment broke, and Jesse stepped back. "I'll ride out to Cedar Ridge at first light. Bring Freeman back if I have to drag him. You just keep yourself safe until then." "I can take care of myself." His smile was crooked. "I know. That's what worries me." They parted ways, Maeve heading back to her camp while Jesse went to the boarding house. Neither saw the figure watching from the shadows, or the rider who spurred away toward Creed's big house on the hill. At her camp, Maeve found more than she'd left. A pot of stew sat warming by her fire, along with fresh bread and a note in Mrs. Kowalski's careful hand. "Neighbors help neighbors. Don't be too proud." She ate mechanically, planning tomorrow's moves. The church social would buy time, but not much. And if Freeman couldn't or wouldn't come, the Mustang colt whinnied softly, and she went to check his leg. The swelling had gone down, and he barely limped now. Another few days and he'd be ready to run free again. "Must be nice," she told him, having the choice. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. She had choices. Stay and fight, run and hide, give up or dig in. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, she had a warm fire, a full belly, and the memory of Jesse Coulter looking at her like she was something worth fighting for. It wasn't much, but it was enough to kindle hope. And hope, like a Mustang, was a hard thing to kill once it decided to live. The night wind rattled through the gaps in Maeve's half-built cabin walls, carrying with it the scent of rain and trouble. She couldn't sleep, couldn't stop pacing the small space like a caged animal. Tomorrow's deadline loomed heavy as storm clouds. Jesse had left for Cedar Ridge before dawn, racing against time to find Freeman. But even if he succeeded, would one man's word be enough against Creed's money and influence? A sound outside made her freeze boot steps, deliberate and unhurried. She reached for her rifle, then heard the voice that made her blood run cold. "Miss O'Rourke, no need for weapons. Just came to talk." Wade Krantz stood in her doorway, silhouetted against the stars. Behind him, she could make out two more figures. Her grip tightened on the rifle. "Talking's done at civilized hours," she said, "with civilized men." Wade chuckled, stepping inside, uninvited. "Now that's unfriendly. Here I came to offer you one last chance." He pulled something from his pocket, a coil of rope fashioned into a noose. He tossed it at her feet. "Know what this means?" "I know what you want me to think it means. Horse thieves hang in these parts. That Mustang colt you've been nursing, funny thing, matches the description of one that went missing from Mr. Creed's stock." "That's a lie. We found him injured in a storm." "Your word against his, and we both know how that usually goes." Wade's smile was all teeth in the darkness. "Of course, if you were to leave tonight, take your colt and whatever you can carry, well, no one would need to pursue the matter." Rage built in Maeve's chest, hot and wild. "Get out!" "Think careful now. A woman alone, already carrying scandal from back east, accused of theft." He shook his head with mock sympathy. "Even Coulter couldn't save you from that." Something in the way he said Jesse's name made her stomach drop. "Where is he?" "Last I heard, riding hard for Cedar Ridge. Shame about that bridge washing out. Have to go the long way around now. Might take him an extra day, maybe 2. The implications hit her like a fist. They'd trapped Jesse on the road, isolated her here. The church social wouldn't matter if they could manufacture charges before then. "You've got 1 hour, Wade said, turning to leave. "Pack light, and Miss O'Rourke, that colt stays. Evidence, you understand." After they left, Maeve sank onto a crate, the noose lying at her feet like a poisonous snake. Everything was unraveling. Without Jesse, without Freeman, without even the Mustang colt she'd saved, what did she have left? She looked around the small space at the walls she'd raised with her own hands, the hearth she'd built stone by stone. Moonlight filtered through the gaps, painting silver lines across the floor she'd laid with such hope. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No!" She'd run once before, let fear and shame drive her from everything she'd known. But that was a different woman, one who still believed in fairy tales and honest men. This Maeve, the one forged in Wyoming dust and determination, was done running, moving quickly. She gathered what she needed, not to flee, but to fight. If they wanted to play dirty, she'd learned a few tricks of her own. An hour later, Wade returned with 4 men, expecting to find her gone or cowering. Instead, they found her sitting on her doorstep, rifle across her lap, the Mustang colt grazing peacefully nearby. "Thought I made myself clear," Wade growled. "Crystal clear. I just disagree with your terms." She stood slowly, keeping the rifle pointed down, but ready. "You want me gone? Come back with a real judge and real charges. Until then, this is my land." Wade's face darkened. "Boys, search the place. Look for stolen property." "Touch my things and I'll shoot you for trespassing." "You wouldn't dare." Maeve raised the rifle smooth as silk, sighting down the barrel at Wade's chest. "Try me." The tension stretched taut as wire. Wade's men looked uncertain. Roughing up an unarmed woman was one thing, but facing down someone willing to fight back was another. "You fire that weapon, you'll hang for certain," Wade said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. "Maybe, but you'll be too dead to enjoy it." A voice cut through the standoff like a blade. "What's all this, then?" Doc Rivera emerged from the darkness, and he wasn't alone. Mrs. Kowalski was with him, along with her husband and 3 other neighbors. Even Hector Boone from the saloon had come, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Just serving notice on a squatter," Wade said, not taking his eyes off Maeve's rifle. "Funny way to serve notice, skulking around in the dark like thieves." Doc stepped forward, medical bag in hand. "I came to check on that injured colt, Mrs. Kowalski brought supper. These folks just happened to tag along. This is legal business." "Then conduct it legally," Mr. Kowalski said. His English was heavily accented but clear. "In daylight, with proper papers." Wade looked at the growing crowd, calculating odds. Whatever he saw made him holster his weapon. "This isn't over." "No," Maeve agreed. "It's not?" After Wade and his men left, the neighbors lingered. Mrs. Kowalski pressed a basket of food into Maeve's hands while her husband and the others walked the property line, checking for damage. "That was brave," Doc said quietly. "Also foolish. Sometimes they're the same thing." "Jesse would be proud, also furious." His smile was wry. "That boy's got it bad for you, in case you hadn't noticed." Heat crept up Maeve's neck. "He's just being decent." Decent men don't risk everything for a woman they barely know, unless that woman means something more than she should. Before Maeve could respond, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Her heart leaped, thinking Jesse had returned. But the horse that crested the ridge carried a different rider. Bethany Clare dismounted with practiced grace, her riding habit immaculate despite the hour. She surveyed the gathered neighbors with cool amusement. "My, what a party! And here I thought you'd be packing." "If you've come to gloat, you're premature," Maeve said. "Gloat heavens no, I came to help." Bethany's smile was sharp as glass. "You see, I know something about Mr. Creed that might interest you. Something about forged deeds and dead surveyors." The crowd went still. Doc Rivera stepped forward. "If you have information about criminal activity—" "Oh, I have information. The question is what it's worth." Her gaze found Maeve. "I propose a trade. I help you keep your land. You help me with a personal matter." "What kind of personal matter?" "Jesse Coulter." The name fell between them like a stone. "I want him to court me proper, publicly. You step aside, make it clear there's nothing between you, and I'll give you enough ammunition to bury Silas Creed." The words hit Maeve like a physical blow. Around her, the neighbors muttered uneasily. But she kept her eyes on Bethany. You're lying. You don't have anything. Bethany reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a leather portfolio. Samuel Morrison didn't run to Livingston because he was scared. He ran because he'd been shot. Survived, but barely. I have his sworn statement about who hired the men who tried to kill him, and why. She opened the portfolio just enough for Maeve to see official-looking documents covered in cramped handwriting. All yours, in exchange for a simple promise. Step aside. Let me have what I want. The night suddenly felt colder. Maeve looked at the papers that could save everything she'd worked for, then thought of Jesse riding through the darkness, racing to help her. No. Bethany blinked. Excuse me? I said no. I won't trade someone else's life for my own benefit. Not again. You'd lose everything for a man who hasn't even declared himself. Maeve's laugh was soft, sad. I already lost everything once, chasing security over truth. If I lose it again standing for what's right, at least I'll still have myself. Bethany's composure cracked. You stupid, stupid girl. Do you know what you're throwing away? Yes. Maeve met her gaze steadily. I know exactly what I'm choosing. For a moment, rage flashed across Bethany's perfect features. Then she smiled, cold as winter moonlight. Your loss. When you're run out of town with nothing but the clothes on your back, remember I offered you a choice. She remounted and rode off, taking the evidence with her. The neighbors stood silent, processing what they'd witnessed. Finally, Hector Boone cleared his throat. That was something. Miss O'Rourke. Can't say I've seen many turn down a winning hand for principal. Principals don't keep you warm at night, Mrs., Kowalski said, but her tone was approving. Still, it's good to see. These days, too many sell too cheap. They stayed until dawn, an impromptu guard against any further night visits. As the sun painted the mountains gold and rose, Doc Rivera pulled Maeve aside. What you did tonight refusing Bethany's offer, that took courage. Or stupidity. Maybe, but Jesse Coulter's a good man. He deserves someone who'd choose him over easy answers. He paused. And you deserve someone who'd ride through hell for you. Seems to me you might have found each other. The sound of approaching horses cut off her reply. This time, it was Jesse, dust-covered and exhausted, but not alone. Beside him rode a dignified older man in a surveyor's coat, Josiah Freeman. The man introduced himself, dismounting stiffly. Jesse here convinced me it was time to speak up about what I know. Seems Creed's been playing fast and loose with boundary lines for years. Relief flooded through Maeve so strong her knees nearly buckled. Jesse was at her side instantly, his hand steadying her elbow. You all right? Wade didn't... I'm fine. We had some excitement, but the neighbors helped. His eyes searched hers, reading more than she was saying. Maeve, what happened? She wanted to tell him everything about Wade's threats, about Bethany's offer, about the choice she'd made. Instead, she just smiled. Nothing that matters now. You brought Freeman. That's what counts. Jesse's expression said they'd discuss it later, but he let it go. We need to get to the church social. Make our stand public before Creed can maneuver around it. About that, Freeman said, there's something else you should know. I wasn't the only surveyor Creed tried to buy. Thomas Henley took his money, filed false reports, but he kept the originals. Insurance, he called it. Where is he now? Doc asked. Freeman's face was grim. Dead, train accident last month, but his widow might still have his papers. She lives in Cheyenne. Another thread to chase, another hope to follow. Maeve felt exhaustion tugging at her bones, but also something else. Determination, fierce as flame. Then we'd better get moving, she said. The social starts at noon, and I intend to be there. Jesse smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. That's my girl. The words slipped out natural as breathing, and Maeve felt her cheeks heat, but she didn't correct him. Couldn't, really, with her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild thing. Maybe she was his girl. Maybe he was her man. Maybe, in this hard country where tomorrow was always uncertain. That was enough. They had a fight ahead still, but for the first time since Wade had thrown that noose at her feet, Maeve believed they might actually win. And if not well, at least she'd go down swinging, with friends at her side and her principles intact. The Mustang colt whinnied as they prepared to leave. His leg nearly healed, his spirit unbroken. Maeve stroked his neck, whispering a promise. Soon, boy, soon you'll run free again. We both will. Freedom, not just from Creed or the past, but from fear itself. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. The courthouse in Sagebrush Bluff wasn't much to look at. A squat adobe building that served as town hall, jail and meeting place all rolled into one. But today it hosted something more important than its weathered walls suggested justice, or at least the chance for it. Judge Samuel Pritchard, the circuit judge, sat behind a makeshift bench, his face carved from years of frontier law. The church social had been postponed, the whole town packed into the courthouse instead, drawn by the promise of drama. Maeve sat straight-backed in the front row, Jesse beside her. Across the aisle, Silas Creed lounged with practiced ease, his city lawyers flanking him like well-dressed wolves. Wade Krantz stood by the door, star polished bright, hand never far from his gun. The matter before us, Judge Pritchard began, his voice cutting through the murmurs, concerns the disputed boundary lines of the O'Rourke property and claims by the Territorial Railroad Company. One of Creed's lawyers stood, smooth as oil. Your Honor, this is quite simple. We have updated survey documents showing the original boundaries were recorded in error. The railroad has legal claim to the disputed section, including water rights. He produced papers with official-looking seals. Furthermore, Miss O'Rourke has been maintaining illegal possession of railroad property, despite repeated requests to vacate. That's a lie, Maeve said, standing. Jesse touched her arm, but she shook him off. Those documents are forged. The original survey. Can you produce these original documents? The lawyer interrupted. Maeve's jaw tightened. They were stolen from my property. How convenient. Your Honor, we also have concerns about Miss O'Rourke's character. She fled Boston under suspicious circumstances, accused of theft by her own husband. Objection. Doc Rivera stood from the gallery. Character assassination has no place in a property dispute. Judge Pritchard banged his gavel. Agreed. Stick to the facts at hand. Counselor. The lawyer smiled thinly. Of course. The facts are these: we have documentation. She has none. The law is clear. I have a witness, Maeve said. Josiah Freeman, the territorial surveyor who verified my original boundaries. Freeman stood, weathered hands clasped before him. Your Honor, I surveyed that property myself. The boundaries Miss O'Rourke claimed are correct. Any documents saying otherwise are false. A serious accusation, Creed said, speaking for the first time. His voice was cultured, reasonable. Mr. Freeman, isn't it true you've been drinking heavily since your retirement? Memory can play tricks. My memory's fine, Freeman snapped. Fine enough to remember you offering me $500 to adjust those boundaries? Fine enough to remember saying no? The crowd stirred. Judge Pritchard leaned forward. Mr. Creed, did you attempt to bribe a territorial official? Of course not, Mr. Freeman is confused. Perhaps Miss O'Rourke offered him something to testify on her behalf. His smile was snake-cold. A desperate woman might do desperate things. Jesse was on his feet before Maeve could stop him. You lying son of a... Wade's gun cleared leather. Sit down! Coulter, now! Let him speak. Judge Pritchard said mildly, Mr. Coulter, you have something to add. Jesse's hands clenched at his sides, but his voice stayed controlled. I was with Miss O'Rourke when she filed her claim. Everything was legal, proper. It's Creed who's been playing games, moving markers, stealing documents, threatening witnesses. Proof, Mr. Coulter. The proof keeps disappearing. Funny how that works. Judge Pritchard sighed. Without documentation, this comes down to word against word, and the railroad has papers. I have papers too. Everyone turned. Hector Boone stood in the doorway, ledger in hand. The saloon keeper looked nervous but determined. "What kind of papers?" the judge asked. Hector moved forward, boots clicking on the wood floor. "Records. Your Honor, Mr. Creed and his men drink at my establishment. They talk and they pay." He opened the ledger. 3 days before Miss O'Rourke's documents went missing, Wade Krantz paid his tab with railroad company scrip. $50 worth, same amount the railroad's been offering for improvements on disputed land. Wade's face darkened. "That don't prove nothing?" "There's more," Hector continued. "Night before last, heard Mr. Creed himself discussing the Morrison property. How the widow was convinced to sell after her well went bad. How the same thing would happen to the O'Rourke place." "Hearsay," Creed's lawyer objected. "Maybe, but there's this." Hector pulled out a piece of paper. Bar tab from 2 months back, signed by one Thomas Henley, the surveyor who died in that train accident. Except this was dated 3 days after he supposedly died. The courthouse erupted. Judge Pritchard hammered his gavel repeatedly. "Order, Mr. Boone. Are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing, Your Honor. Just presenting what I got. But seems mighty strange. A dead man drinking whiskey in my saloon." Creed's composure finally cracked. He stood, face flushed. "This is ridiculous. A drunk saloon keeper and a confused old surveyor against official documents, Your Honor. I demand—" A gunshot shattered the windows. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. In the chaos, Maeve saw Wade moving, using the confusion to draw on Jessie. She didn't think, just grabbed the nearest chair and swung it with all her strength. The chair connected with Wade's arm, sending his shot wide. Jessie spun, tackling the deputy to the ground. They rolled, fighting for the gun. Another shot from outside, then shouting, "Fire, the livery's on fire!" Half the crowd rushed outside. In the melee, Maeve saw one of Creed's men reaching for the ledgers on the judge's bench. She lunged forward, grabbing the books. "Oh, no, you don't." He backhanded her, sending her sprawling. Stars exploded across her vision, but she held on to the ledgers, clutching them like life itself. "Maeve!" Jessie's voice, raw with fear. He was there, pulling her up, shielding her with his body as more shots rang out. "I'm okay," she gasped. "The books." "Got them. Come on." They stumbled outside into chaos. The livery was indeed ablaze, horses screaming, men forming bucket lines. But Maeve noticed something odd. The fire was contained to empty stalls, away from the animals, almost like it was meant as distraction, not destruction. "There," Doc Rivera pointed. 3 riders were fleeing town. Creed's unmistakable silver hair visible even at distance. "He's running." "Let him go," Judge Pritchard commanded. He'd followed them out, documents still clutched in his hands. "The evidence is here, Mr. Creed can explain himself when we catch him." Wade Krantz sat in the dirt, cradling a broken nose. Jessie standing over him. The deputy's badge lay in the dust, its shine dulled with blood. "It's over, Wade," Jessie said quietly. "Whatever Creed promised you, it ain't worth hanging for." Wade spat blood. "You don't understand. It was never about the money. Creed owns half this territory. Cross him and—" "And what?" Judge Pritchard's voice was steel. "You disappear like Thomas Henley, end up like Morrison, shot for refusing a bribe." Wade's silence was answer enough. The fire was out within an hour, more smoke than damage. As the town gathered to assess the situation, Judge Pritchard held an impromptu session right there in the street. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, voice carrying over the crowd, "I find the original survey of the O'Rourke property to be valid and binding. Any conflicting documents are hereby ruled fraudulent." Cheers erupted from some quarters, dark mutters from others, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm issuing warrants for Silas Creed and any associates involved in fraud, bribery, and attempted murder. Deputy Krantz, you're under arrest." 2 townsmen stepped forward to take Wade into custody. He went without fight, all the fire gone out of him. Judge Pritchard turned to Maeve. "Miss O'Rourke, your land is yours, free and clear. I'll ensure new documents are drawn up and registered properly. No one will challenge your claim again." Maeve's knees nearly buckled with relief. Jessie's arm came around her waist, steady and sure. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me. Thank your neighbors who stood up. Thank Mr. Boone for keeping good records. Thank Mr. Freeman for his honesty." The judge's weathered face cracked into a smile. "And maybe thank Mr. Coulter here for watching your back." As the crowd began to disperse, Bethany Clare appeared at Maeve's elbow. She looked smaller somehow. Her perfect composure cracked. "I suppose you're feeling victorious," she said softly. "I'm feeling tired," Maeve replied, "and grateful it's over." Bethany studied her for a long moment. "I had those papers, Morrison's statement. I would have given them to you." "For a price?" "Everything has a price." Bethany's smile was sad. "But maybe you were right. Some things shouldn't be for sale." She glanced at Jessie, then back to Maeve. "He's a good man. Better than I deserved. Take care of him." She walked away, dignity intact if nothing else. Maeve watched her go, feeling oddly hollow. Victory, she was learning, could taste bittersweet. "Come on," Jessie said quietly. "Let's get you home." Home. The word settled warm in her chest. Not just the land now, but something more. Something worth all the fight. As they rode back to her property, the Mustang colt trotting alongside, Maeve saw her cabin with new eyes. It would need finishing walls chinked, roof completed, a proper door, but it was hers, truly and legally hers. "I'll help with the building," Jessie said, reading her thoughts. "That is, if you'll have me around." She looked at him, this man who'd stood by her when he had every reason to ride away. "Jessie Coulter, are you asking to court me?" His grin was answer enough. "Maeve O'Rourke, I'm asking for a lot more than that, but courting seems a good place to start." She laughed, the sound bright as water in the desert. "Then I suppose you'd better get building. Winter's coming, and I'll need a proper house if I'm to entertain callers." "Yes, ma'am." They worked until sunset, setting foundation stones for what would be the kitchen. The Mustang colt grazed nearby, his leg fully healed, free to leave but choosing to stay. Like all of them, Maeve thought. Free to go, choosing to remain, building something worth keeping in this hard, beautiful land. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Creed was still out there, and men like him didn't give up easy. But tonight, with Jessie beside her and her land secure beneath her feet, Maeve O'Rourke felt something she hadn't felt in years. She was home. The blizzard arrived without mercy, transforming Wyoming's vast landscape into a white hell. It had been 3 months since the courthouse victory. 3 months of building and planning and careful hope. Now, as January 1887 unleashed its fury, all that mattered was survival. Maeve pressed her face to the frosted window of her completed cabin, trying to see through the swirling white. Somewhere out there, the Kowalskis were trapped in a house with a failing roof. Their son had made it to her door an hour ago, half frozen, begging for help. "We can't wait," she told Jessie, who was checking his rifle. "If that roof goes—" "I know." He pulled on his heavy coat. Movements efficient. But this storm's a killer. We get turned around out there. We're done. Doc Rivera finished packing medical supplies into a saddlebag. He'd taken shelter with them when the storm hit, a fortunate timing that now might save lives. The boy said they've got the livestock in the house. That's good animal heat might keep them alive if the roof holds. And if it doesn't? Doc's silence was answer enough. They prepared carefully ropes to tie themselves together. Lanterns, though the wind would likely kill them. Food and blankets. The Mustang colt, now grown into a sturdy yearling they'd named Storm, watched from his stall in the lean-to with intelligent eyes. "You sure about this?" Jessie asked Maeve quietly as she checked her gloves. "They helped me when I needed it. I can't do less." He smiled, the expression warming his storm-gray eyes. "That's my girl." The endearment had become familiar over the months of courtship, but it still sent warmth through her chest. They'd taken things slow, proper, but the whole town knew it was just a matter of time before Jessie Coulter made an honest woman of Maeve O'Rourke. If they survived the night, they ventured into the storm, roped together, Jessie leading, Maeve in the middle, Doc at the rear. The wind hit like a physical thing, stealing breath, coating them in ice within seconds. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Jessie navigated by instinct and memory, following fence lines when they could find them. What should have been a 20-minute ride stretched into an hour of struggle. Maeve's world narrowed to the rope in her hands and Jessie's back, barely visible ahead. Then, through the howling wind, she heard it a creaking, groaning sound. The Kowalski house appeared like a ghost ship in fog, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. "There!" she shouted, though the wind tore the word away. They fought their way to the door. Inside, they found chaos. Half the roof had already collapsed. Snow pouring through. The family huddled with their animals in the remaining corner. Mrs. Kowalski holding her youngest child. Her husband trying to shore up the walls with furniture. "Thank God!" Mr. Kowalski gasped when he saw them. "The children." "We'll get everyone out," Jessie said. "Doc, check for injuries. Maeve, help me with this beam." They worked fast, knowing the rest of the roof could go any moment. The eldest Kowalski boy had a gash on his forehead. 2 of the children showed signs of frostbite, but they were alive. "We need to move them," Doc said. "This structure won't last." In this storm, Mrs. Kowalski clutched her baby tighter. "We'll die out there." "You'll die in here when that roof comes down," Maeve said bluntly. "We've got ropes. We know the way. Trust us." It took precious minutes to bundle everyone, to decide what could be saved and what must be abandoned. In the end, they took only lives. The family. 1 milk cow, 2 horses. The rest would have to fend for themselves. They made a human chain, adults carrying children, everyone roped together. Jessie led them back into the white fury, navigating by some internal compass Maeve couldn't fathom. Halfway back, they heard a crash even over the wind's howl. The Kowalski house had finally surrendered to the storm. "Don't look back," Jessie shouted. "Keep moving." Maeve's cabin appeared like salvation. Warm light spilling from windows she'd helped Jessie install just last month. They tumbled inside. A mass of frozen humanity and frightened animals. "Blankets," Doc ordered, immediately checking the children. "Hot water, Mrs. Kowalski. Get those wet clothes off the little ones." They worked through the night, thawing frozen extremities, treating injuries. Maeve's neat cabin became a refugee camp, but she didn't care. These people had stood by her. Now she stood by them. As dawn broke, the storm finally exhausted itself. Weak sunlight revealed a transformed world drifts tall as houses, familiar landmarks erased. But they'd survived. "We've lost everything," Mrs. Kowalski said quietly, staring out at where their home had been. "Not everything," Maeve said. "You've got your family, your lives. The rest can be rebuilt." "With what we put everything into that place." Maeve exchanged glances with Jesse. They'd discussed this possibility during the long night, whispered plans while tending the injured. "You'll rebuild with our help," Jesse said. "Timber from my place, labor from neighbors. That's how it works out here." "But—" "No buts," Maeve interrupted. "You fed me when I had nothing, brought me water when Wade broke my trough. This isn't charity, it's neighbors being neighbors." "Mr. Kowalski's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed. "We cannot—" "You can and you will," Doc Rivera said firmly. "Unless you want to insult everyone who's ever accepted your help?" That settled it. Pride was one thing, but refusing community was another. They spent the next days digging out, checking on other neighbors. The storm had been devastating, livestock frozen, houses damaged, but no lives lost in their immediate area, a miracle given the storm's fury. It was while checking the far boundary that Jesse made the discovery. "Maeve," he called, voice strange. "You need to see this." She trudged through the snow to where he stood by a drift-covered form. Her blood chilled as she recognized the frozen horse, the expensive saddle. Wade Krantz lay half-buried in snow, frozen solid. He'd been shot, though the wound was days old by the look of it. "He never made it to prison," Jesse said quietly. "Someone made sure of that. They found tracks, barely visible, leading toward the hills where Creed was rumored to be hiding. A clear message loose ends got tied up permanent in Creed's world." "We should tell the sheriff in Cheyenne," Maeve said. "We will, but this changes things." Jesse's expression was grim. "Creed's not just a corrupt businessman anymore. He's desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things." They brought Wade's body back, Doc Rivera confirming what they'd suspected, shot in the back, left for the storm to finish. Even Wade, for all his faults, hadn't deserved that. The funeral was small, awkward. What did you say over a man who'd been your enemy but died worse than a dog in the end? Reverend Patterson read from Ecclesiastes about a time for everything under heaven, and they left it at that. But the discovery had shifted something in the town's mood. Creed wasn't just a nuisance. Now he was a threat. Men started wearing guns to church. Women traveled in groups. "We need to end this," Jesse said one evening as they sat by Maeve's fire. The Kowalskis were staying in her barn while their new house was framed. The sounds of children's laughter drifting through the walls. "How he's hidden. Probably has men with him. The law in Cheyenne won't move without proof he killed Wade." "Then we get proof." Jesse's jaw set in that stubborn line she'd come to know well. "I've been talking to some of the other ranchers. We're forming a committee, legal-like. All proper, citizens looking out for their own." Maeve felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. "Jesse, that sounds like what needs doing." He took her hands, his calloused fingers gentle. "I won't let him hurt you. Won't let him hurt any of ours. And if he comes for you?" "Then I'll be ready." He smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "Besides, I've got a wedding to attend come spring, my own, if a certain Irish woman will have me." Despite everything, Maeve felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Coulter?" "More like a promise." He leaned close, voice dropping. "Maeve O'Rourke, I've loved you since the day you threatened to shoot Wade Krantz on your doorstep. Marry me, and let's build something worth keeping." "Yes," she whispered, and then louder. "Yes, you foolish, wonderful man." He kissed her then, sweet and sure, and for a moment the world beyond her cabin walls ceased to matter. They had this warmth, this hope, this future they were building board by board. Outside, storm, the Mustang whinnied, the sound carrying across the snow-covered valley. Other horses answered, the Kowalskis remaining stock and Jesse's mare creating a chorus of survival. They'd weathered the blizzard. They'd weather Creed, too. The next morning brought sun and bitter cold, but also determination. Men gathered at the church, forming their committee. making plans. The women organized, too, creating a network of communication and support. Maeve stood with them. No longer the outsider, but part of the community's fabric. She'd earned her place through sweat and courage and simple human decency. "Whatever comes." "Mrs.," Kowalski said, squeezing her hand. "We face together." Together, such a simple word, but it held all the power in the world. As Maeve looked out over the valley she'd fought so hard to claim, she saw not just land, but home. Not just neighbors, but family. Not just survival, but life. Real and full and worth every struggle. Silas Creed thought he understood power money and threats and bullets in the back. But he'd never understood this. The power of people standing together, refusing to break. Come spring, she'd marry Jesse Coulter in the church their community had built. Come spring, they'd plant crops and raise horses and children. Come spring, they'd prove that some things couldn't be bought or stolen or destroyed. But first, they had winter to finish, and Creed to face. Maeve O'Rourke Coulter. She tried the name in her mind and smiled, was ready for both. Spring came to Wyoming like a blessing after the hardest winter in memory. The snow melted slowly, revealing the scars of struggle-collapsed barns, dead cattle, the remnants of lives torn apart by nature's fury, but also revealing hope, green shoots pushing through mud, streams running full, and the sound of hammers as neighbors rebuilt what the storm had taken. Maeve stood on the porch of her cabin, now properly finished with Jesse's help, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. In the months since the blizzard, so much had changed. The investigation into Wade's death had brought federal marshals, and with them, finally, a reckoning. "Letter came," Jesse said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. He'd been staying in the barn proper courtship, even though everyone knew they'd be married come Sunday. "From Cheyenne." Maeve took the envelope, recognizing the official seal inside. The news they'd been waiting for Silas Creed had been captured trying to flee to Mexico. More importantly, he'd been convicted fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and yes, murder. The railroad's attempts to steal land through forged documents had unraveled completely. 20 years hard labor, she read aloud. Assets seized and distributed among those he wronged. "Justice," Jesse said simply. "Finally." Maeve leaned into his solid warmth. "Though it won't bring back what folks lost." "No, but it means we can build without looking over our shoulders." They stood in comfortable silence, watching storm graze in the pasture. The Mustang had never left, choosing domesticity over wildness. Or perhaps, Maeve thought, finding a different kind of freedom in belonging. "You ready for Sunday?" Jesse asked. "Ready to be your wife. I've been ready since you helped me raise that first beam." She smiled. "You been ready since you threatened to shoot Wade on your doorstep." His grin matched hers. "Though I'm glad you've gotten less trigger-happy since then." She elbowed him playfully, only slightly less. The week passed in a blur of preparations. The whole town pitched in misses. Kowalski and the church ladies making food. Doc Rivera officiating since Reverend Patterson was traveling. The men building benches to accommodate the crowd. It seemed everyone in 3 counties wanted to witness the marriage of Maeve O'Rourke and Jesse Coulter. "It's become more than just our wedding," Maeve said to Mrs. Tillerson, who had surprisingly offered to help with flowers. The banker's wife had softened considerably since the truth about Creed came out. "It's what you represent, dear," the older woman said, arranging wildflowers with practiced hands. "You fought for what was right, won against odds that would have broken most. And you did it with grace." "Grace," Maeve laughed. "I seem to recall threatening quite a few people with my rifle." "Well, frontier grace, perhaps." Mrs. Tillerson's smile was wry. "The point is, you showed us all what courage looks like, and that young man of yours did the same, standing by you when it would have been easier to walk away." Saturday evening, Bethany Clare appeared at Maeve's door. She looked different, simpler dress, honest tiredness around her eyes. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Taking the morning stage to Denver, but I wanted to—" She paused, seeming to struggle with words. "I wanted to apologize, and to wish you well." Maeve studied the woman who had tried to manipulate her, threatened her. But she saw something else now, too: loneliness, regret, the weight of bad choices. "Where will you go?" "I have a cousin in Denver. She runs a boarding house. Honest work." Bethany's smile was self-deprecating. Time I learned what that means. On impulse, Maeve reached out and took her hand. "Good luck, Bethany. I mean that." Bethany's eyes misted. "You're a better woman than I ever was. Maeve O'Rourke, Jesse Coulter is a lucky man." She squeezed Maeve's hand once, then left quickly, dignity intact. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the sky that endless Wyoming blue that made the heart soar. Maeve stood before the mirror in her cabin, wearing her mother's wedding dress carefully preserved through all her travels, altered now to fit. Mrs. Kowalski fussed with the buttons. Beautiful, like spring itself. Nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs? Maeve admitted, "Good, means it matters." The older woman's eyes were knowing. "My Stefan, he was so nervous on our wedding day, he forgot his own name during vows. 25 years later, still the best mistake he ever made." The church was packed to overflowing, people standing outside to witness through open windows. Maeve walked down the aisle alone, no father to give her away. But that felt right. She was giving herself, freely and gladly. Jesse waited at the altar, handsome in his best suit, gray eyes bright with emotion. When he saw her, his face transformed with such pure joy that Maeve felt tears threaten. Doc Rivera performed the ceremony with simple eloquence, speaking of partnership and courage, of building something together stronger than what either could build alone. When he asked for the rings, young Timothy Kowalski stepped forward proudly, having guarded them all morning.
"Do you, Jesse Samuel Coulter, take this woman?"
"I do," Jesse said, strong and sure. "Do you, Maeve Elizabeth O'Rourke, take this man?" "I do," she whispered, then louder, "I absolutely do." The kiss was sweet and brief, appropriate for church, but promising more. The congregation erupted in cheers that could probably be heard in Cheyenne. The reception sprawled across the church grounds, tables groaning with food, fiddle music filling the air. Maeve and Jesse led the first dance, clumsy but laughing, surrounded by the community that had become family. "No regrets?" Jesse asked as they swayed. "Only that it took us so long to get here. Had to earn it first." He spun her carefully. "Make sure we knew what we were fighting for." Hector Boone raised a toast, his saloon providing the drinks. "To the new Mrs. Coulter, who showed us all what grit looks like. And to Jesse, smart enough to recognize a treasure when he saw one. May your lives be long, your troubles few, and your children numerous." Laughter and more toasts followed. Even Storm seemed to understand the celebration, prancing along the fence line with a ribbon Mrs. Kowalski's daughter had tied in his mane. As evening approached, Maeve and Jesse slipped away to their cabin, their home now, truly and completely. Maeve paused at the threshold, looking back at the ongoing party, the lights strung between buildings, the sound of joy carrying on the wind. "Second thoughts?" Jesse asked softly. "No, just remembering." She touched the doorframe, thinking of that first day, hammering boards alone, suspicious and scared. "I came here running from everything, found more than I ever dreamed." "Found each other," Jesse agreed. "Found home." Inside, the cabin glowed with warmth. Jesse had added surprises curtains she'd admired in town, a rocking chair by the fire, a bookshelf already half filled. On the mantel sat a new daguerreotype, their wedding portrait, taken that afternoon by a traveling photographer. "Welcome home, Mrs. Coulter, Jesse said formally, then grinned. Been wanting to say that all day. Later, as they sat by the fire, still in their wedding clothes, but comfortable now, Maeve pulled out a leather journal. What's that? Jesse asked. Our story. I've been writing it down. Everything that happened. Figured someday our children might want to know how their parents met. Over a torn shirt and threats of violence? Jesse laughed. That'll be a tale. A true one. She opened to a fresh page, dated it. April 15th, 1888. Today I married the best man in Wyoming Territory. Today I stopped being alone. She paused, then added, But really, I stopped being alone the day Jesse Coulter offered to trade work for mending. I just didn't know it yet. Read me what you wrote about that first day, Jesse requested, pulling her close. So she did, reading about the woman she'd been scared but determined, alone but unbroken, about the man who'd seen past her defenses to something worth protecting, about a land that tested them and neighbors who became family. Needs an ending, Jesse said when she finished. We're still writing it. Maeve replied, Every day. Outside, the Mustang storm whinnied, the sound carrying across their land legally theirs, hard-won and precious. From the church, music still played, voices raised in celebration of love and community and survival. Maeve closed the journal and set it aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dreams to build. They'd raise horses and children, plant gardens and gather harvests, weather whatever storms came. But tonight, in the cabin they'd built with their own hands, surrounded by the land they'd fought to keep, Jesse and Maeve Coulter had everything they needed. They were home. Home isn't something that's given, Maeve murmured against Jesse's shoulder. It's something we build together, board by board, day by day. Then let's keep building, Jesse said simply. And they did. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Maeve and Jesse's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it with you. Where are you listening from? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about their story and connect with fellow Western romance lovers from around the world. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these tales of courage, love, and the untamed American West. Until our next adventure, partners.